Bi-ethnic women are presented in media. It is primarily through the male gaze, with the primary focus being their sexuality. Exotification is the process of taking difference among people, racial or otherwise, and sexualizing or aestheticizing it, as stated by Rachel Arsenault. In this view, quote unquote them or quote unquote the other is defined as everything that we are not, which has the effect of reducing quote unquote them to very distilled, narrow stereotypes. This in turn makes them seem less human. Therefore, compliments of this nature make women feel like a spectacle or an experience rather than a whole person, and thus are not really compliments at all. So today I'm going to be talking about the biracial hippie trope. I'm starting to wonder if this was inspired by Bob Marley's One Love song or just white folks living vicariously through biracial actors and or actresses. I realized this trope has occurred multiple times and like television shows, particularly among biracial women, and I just thought it was worth talking about today, so I'm going to talk about it. So the first person who depicts the biracial hippie trope is Lisa Bonet. Lisa Bonet played the character Denise Huxtable. Lisa Bonet happens to be African American and Jewish. In The Cosby Show, Denise was the second Huxtable child. She was known for just being pretty much bold and, having these unique fashion choices and bringing home peculiar boyfriends. After getting married, she begins to settle down and you see more mature Denise. However, throughout the show, there were different things that happened on stage and off stage. I would say arguably in real life, she was very free-spirited and artistic. She had shoots where they were practically nude, and this upset Bill Cosby, pretty much kicked her off the show by making her character kind of flunk out of college. I would say this had a large part to do with his respectability politics. Comment below if you want a deep dive on Bill Cosby, by the way. It wasn't until time went by that Denise even got to be back on the show, and when she came back, her image wasn't like this irresponsible character like on the show. She was quote unquote married, and then she brought her daughter at the time, who was Olivia, a young Raven Simone, on the show. So I thought that was interesting, but I'm just gonna move along. Next up is Freddie, played by the actress Cre Summers. She is an African Canadian Aboriginal actress, musician, and voice actress. Her character was a bit of a hippie, and she had a lot of socio-political ideas and expressions. In later seasons, she became an attorney. Ironically, she straightened her curly hair, which to me was her signature marker. There was an episode where her white mother came to visit the campus that she attended, or HBCU, and Freddie's former boyfriend, Shazan, who was a black light-skinned man with freeform locks and very high establishment like her, he seemed to fit in with the family. And so it was just funny how the mother reacted when she found out they were no longer dating. I would argue that Cre Summers is also very hippie-ish in real life. She's had videos where she's shown her home, which I believe is made out of natural elements, or a dome or earth home. I can't remember the exact title. She pretty much has solar panel, large home, and she's just very earthy, and I think that happens to be because of her ethnic cultural identity as well. As stated by Hadia Bendel, the bi-ethnic woman character fell into two categories in film and television: the new millennium mulatta and the exceptional multiracial. New millennium mulatta is aware of her dual identity, but is self-conscious of her impending tragedy and therefore falls into the tragic mulatta stereotype. The exceptional multiracial transcends race, but in turn transcends her blackness to then disavow both of her races. And so next up, I'm going to talk about Rachel True, who played Mona on Half and Half. So Rachel True was an actress who played on the television show Half and Half. She later played in the horror movie The Craft, which to me also depicted the hippie trope because there's black magic and witchcraft. If you know, you know. Anyway, she is a mixed race. Her father is Jewish and her mother is mixed with black. And so in the show Half and Half, Mona and Dee Dee are pretty much half sisters with the same father. Didn't really know each other when they were little and are complete opposites in personalities. But when they become adults, they end up living in the same apartment building and try to bond despite their differences. So I was a bit shocked when I grew up and learned that Mona wasn't biracial in the show, perhaps. When I watched the show as a child, I thought it was called Half and Half because her sister was biracial. Now I just found out it was just her half sister because they had different mothers. In the show, Mona was also a bit quirky and did fit the norm in a lot of ways and was usually teased because of it. I think that also played into the biracial hippie trope. I'm going to take a break and talk about just the hippie narrative, or just like a little bit history of the hippie and how a lot of racial couples having biracial children because of what was going on as far as like historical times. So in the 1960s, it was a very controversial decade of the United States. During this period, a lot of values and norms were broken down, particularly among the younger groups of people. Most of them became political activists, while others detached themselves from the mainstream appearances, lifestyles, and attitudes. One of those happened to be interracial relationships. There were huge numbers of young people who created a new culture, again, that opposed the old one in order to achieve equality, including sexual liberation and what some would consider peace. One of the most well-known liberal countercultures was the hippie subculture, which was a youth movement that originated in the United States during the 60s, later spread through the entire world. Hippies were not engaged in politics and promoted their own distinctive lifestyle that was free from any type of materialism and often legal constraints. Moreover, hippies were advocating the equalities of sexes and races. They were very often what some would consider society outcasts. And despite all of this, they still supported nonviolence, peace, and free love among all people, as stated by Adina Sudi. This kind of leads me to my next character, Lynn from Girlfriends. Lynn's sister, who's like a bit Afrocentric, or I guess what some would consider a cultural appropriator, visits her. A lot of the girlfriends like her, but sometimes they give her the side eye because they feel like she's either trying too hard or overstepping her boundaries. One of those incidents happens to be when her sister uses the N-word.
What? Somebody better get her because Peaches got a hot comb in his hands, okay?
Girl, you know what? No. I know that you crossed the line. Girl, what were you thinking? She wasn't thinking. Look, everyone, I'm really sorry. I am so embarrassed outside.
And let me just back up and introduce Lynn. And Lynn, whose real name is Persia White, is one of the characters from Girlfriends. In real life, she is from the Bahamas. She has an Irish-American mother and a Bahamian father. So Lynn is basically like this free-spirited, easygoing person in the show. She's very intelligent and she has multiple master's degrees. Only thing that kind of makes some people look at Lynn like she's like balanced is the fact that she doesn't really keep a job and she kind of lives off of her friends per se. She doesn't really have stability, but she's often like sleeping with men and just sleeping on anyone's couch as well.
So you guys used to date or something?
No, him? No.
Got me some land last week, y'all. Got me some land last week. Stepped in there on Monday, didn't leave till Sunday. Sexing her was a full-time gig. Came in at 220, left at 150 pounds, that is. She showed me her leg spin. I gave her my oh my. Played her legs on my shoulders, watched her toes cross like curly fries.
But she's very true to herself and she really doesn't apologize for it. So that's what makes her not only unique, but make people like her in a lot of ways. Historically, even still today, fair-skinned Black or bi-ethnic women were desired to play what was known as the quote-unquote cinnamon-colored gal. Similar to the tragic mulatta and often used interchangeably, the cinnamon-colored gal was an exotic sex object torn between her loyalties and her own inner thoughts. Each of these roles remains problematic in their own way. The cinnamon-colored gal and the tragic mulatta are still apparent in these roles. It is, however, normalized under society's romanticization of sex and lust, stated by Hadia Delham. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about Tracee Ellis Ross and the show Mixish. So, in Tracee Ellis Ross' father is Jewish and her mother is African American. And the show Mixish, it's like a prequel of Blackish. And so it pretty much talks about Tracee Ellis's character as a child. So Rainbow Bo Johnson is played by Arika Himmel, who's like a 12-year-old. And their family is pretty much ejected from the hippie commune where they live. And the adult Bo Ross narrates a predicament that follows like this government raid of their community. Bo's black mother and white father have now, since they've been ejected from the community, have to raise their 3 biracial children in what some would consider a harsh world of the mid-1980s, aka suburban America. It's set during the broader Reagan era, quote unquote. Mixish is driven by pretty much like this identity crisis Rainbow and her siblings, Joe, and Santa Monica face. First day at their new school, people are like questioning like their dark skin or why they look so strange. Someone asks, "What are you weirdos mixed with?" And while the classmates are laughing, Johnson kids just are like asking what's mixed, because it's so normal for them to live amongst each other, not really question race. But now they have to like think about the society in which they live in. So I think this is kind of interesting because not only was Tracy Ellis not really depicted as a hippie in the show, it did depict the stages of like a biracial child, particularly those of like hippie parents. And I think it's interesting also because I don't remember too many people questioning Tracy Ellis Ross's identity until she came out with her pattern products. Also, like on Girlfriends and a lot of her shows, I think people knew she was light skinned, but the fact that she always wore her natural hair, like loose, curly, thick afro, people just kind of thought, oh, she's down to earth, she's Diana Ross's daughter, we accept her. So it was like she never really had to pick a side, as biracial women and biracial people often speak on. Now I'm going to get into the public opinion piece. So someone says, I notice in a lot of black TV shows, sitcoms, and movies, light-skinned or biracial actress will play this bohemian, Mother Earth type role. Everywhere from print ads to commercials, they're always a model in the boho type clothing and lifestyle. Maybe looking into it, but even as a kid, I noticed this typecast. I brought it up with a friend earlier when we were watching TV, and she thought it was funny. In white films and shows, they're the curly-haired friend that wants to ride her bike in the mountains, sets up healing potions, is sometimes a witchy type character, and gives everyone deep spiritual advice. It's like a token role. I don't know where it came from, but I think it's funny and just something I noticed. Says, I don't look too deep into these kind of things. I do notice that biracials are raised to have a quote unquote love is love kind of mentality. Maybe that's why some of them are like this. I'm going to say there might be something to it. If you think about the kind of couples producing biracial children in the 60s and 70s, probably going to run into some free-spirited types. I could see a woman like Obama's mother, for example, mothering Freddie Brooks or Denise Huxtable. It's a stereotypical role that is often true. I've known many mixed hippies, RC types, actresses could be choosing roles that are easy for them to interpret. Find their roles are overly sexual too, thinking of Lynn from Girlfriends, because the boho hippie aesthetic and lifestyle is coded as white. Biracial also being a good alternative, like being alternative / goth, is coded as white, so therefore the closest looking women to white will get those roles, and seen as normal in terms of social roles and things, like when people say quote unquote blue or red hair doesn't look good on black women. I think because dominant society sees mixed race as an aberration, and because of that, mixed people are thought to be free of the constraints of provincial life. Most black Americans don't think this because mixed race isn't that exotic to us. Whites, when they acknowledge biracials, people from more homogeneous cultures tend to attribute a lot of odd characteristics to the mixing of the blood. It is creepy, really. In my opinion, it's a tool for casting directors for TV shows and films to quote unquote kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Up the diversity quota for the cast, also to sate their closed-minded and prejudicial mindsets, because, according to them, dark-skinned black people are more believable as gregarious, ratchets, and as violent characters in FUBU and Thames than to be pacifist and nonviolent. Okay, and so now I'm going to get to my conclusion. White ethnic individuals have had a long period of being tortured in heinous ways. Much like African slaves historically, have also experienced exclusion from both their white side via the one drop rule and their black side via perceived light skin privilege, as stated by Hadia. So I think that overall, again, it is interesting how this trope exists. And while it's cool if people are this way, to constantly see it as this is the only way people can be, it just seems like it's rooted in exoticism. It's weird because it reminds me of like mysticism in a way too. So that's all I got to say about this topic. Let me know what you think down below. Do you have a favorite character of this trope? Or what are your thoughts on this trope generally? And thank you for listening to Books and Looks TV. I'll see y'all next time.